Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Becky Talks Parks, a podcast for parks and recreation professionals who are passionate about raising the bar in the field. Today, I am so lucky to be talking with Dustin Graham. He is a parks and playground designer, and he works for Great Southern Recreation, and he is an amazing professional who has so much insight about the future of playgrounds and some of those emerging trends in the field. We get really in depth about how playgrounds and parks are really the foundation for kids to develop into well-rounded adults, and how playgrounds are a great place for risk-taking. You'll see that he's just got so many different ideas and observations about the way that we can use the natural features of a landscape to create unique structures. We don't have to have a flat piece of land anymore, and we don't want cookie cutter playgrounds anymore. We want to be able to have something that is unique, that makes us stand out, and that makes people want to come back again and again and again. I had such a pleasure to talk with Dustin. I found out that he is also a University of Georgia alumni, and so we had a lot in common, as you'll find out in the conversation, and he is also in the Southeast as well. So if you will please listen to this episode all the way through, you'll see that he is an amazing perspective about parks and recreation and where it's going. So thanks for listening. Stay tuned and catch you next week every Tuesday. Thanks again, you guys.
I'm Dustin Graham, and I am currently employed by Great Southern Recreation as a designer and territory manager here in the Southeast in Tennessee and Georgia. So I get the privilege to design and sell playgrounds and splash pads and outdoor classrooms, pretty much anything outside for the community to access and use, and hopefully provide a space for kids to play and learn about themselves, and for parents to sit down and maybe take a load off. But while I'm doing that, I get to travel and see a lot of the South, and essentially I'm a kid with Legos, like just giant Legos, and I get to design and create these spaces that are eventually built by our company. And I just have a great time doing it and learning more about the wild world of recreation and what kids are enjoying and what communities want to see in their park renovations and developments.
That's so neat. It really is a wild world of recreation. I like that. So can you tell me like how you got into this? Because what you do is amazing, but can you talk to us about how you got here?
Yeah, it's a wild, kind of twisty turvy path I took to get to where I'm at today. So I started off when I was 14. I was a counselor in training at my local county's park, and at Providence Park in Milton, Georgia. Grew up going there as a kid and was employed there. And we would take, a 5-day Monday through Friday day camp situation during the summer, and take kids rock climbing and rappelling. There was a quarry actually on site at the camp. So it used to be an old granite quarry, and it was bought by the county and, was turned into a park. So really great activities for rock climbing, rappelling. There was a high ropes course. We had 12-foot NRS rafts, and we'd go rafting down the Chattahoochee. So I really got bit by the recreation bug at a young age, and also the opportunity to be a facilitator of recreation for younger kids than myself. So starting off I guess I was a sophomore in high school, like around 15 or 16, was when I got to be a full-fledged counselor and make a solid paycheck over the summer. And I was like, this is the bee's knees. Like, this is the best thing ever, right? I get to go out from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and I'm either climbing or rafting or hiking, or like I'm outside and I'm getting paid to do it. And I just loved it. So I did that all through high school. When I was in college, worked for WindShape camps at Berry College, and facilitated their outdoor recreation group, the offsite group. So for 2 weeks at a time, we'd go off and we'd take extended backpacking trips and do more of the same stuff: rock climbing, rafting, orienteering, that kind of thing. living out of a backpack for a week at a time and coming back, reloading your kit, and then going back to the woods and having fun with these kids. So I was a recreation major at the University of Georgia and
Go
thought I wanted
dogs.
go dogs. I'm
Yes.
glad you're a Bulldog fan.
Yes.
Um,
Wait,
did you
what is
do
your major?
recreation and leisure studies?
Okay. Okay. So my major was natural resources, recreation, and tourism.
Nerd. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So
Yeah.
you went to the different, it was slightly different. What college was that in?
It was College of Education.
Okay. Got
Yeah.
you.
And yours was natural resources, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So no one told me about NERT until I was like halfway through the program.
Okay.
It's is interesting.
It is.
Um, and if I had known about it, I think I might have gone a different path. But the my major, since it was recreation and leisure studies, we did quite a bit of paper writing, and
Yes.
curriculum writing, and understanding that diverse communities and minority populations have, a need for recreation as well. And we took a historical view of it, like the first African American beach called American Beach, and learning that, in during Jim Crow era, blacks couldn't go to the beach. There wasn't a beach for them. So a black entrepreneur, I'm blanking on his name, but he bought a bunch of land and created this space for Black Americans to have the quintessential beach vacation that they were missing out on. So I got to see it from a kind of a more liberal social perspective a lot of times in that class. But through that, I got to create curriculums for the senior center in Athens, Georgia,
Mhm.
and did a 2-week curriculum there. And we'd go in and we would teach them how to, it was during the fall. So we did a Halloween festival and, let all the older folks that were in there get their hands dirty and make their own pumpkins. So kind of, along the lifespan, everybody starts as a baby, grows up, and kind of ends as a baby, if you want to think of it from a developmental
Right.
standpoint. So we were providing these very elementary skills, painting a pumpkin, actually gutting a pumpkin, and we would help them carve a pumpkin. We would teach them how to use a Nintendo Wii. It was kind of when the Nintendo Wii first came to the scene. So a friend in the classroom had a Wii, and we brought that to the senior home and taught them all how to do Wii bowling, low impact Wii. So they got to do that from their wheelchairs and have fun and laugh and giggle the way we do when we were learning a new video game. So I did University of Georgia, went through my tenure there, graduated, and decided to do wilderness therapy in Northeast Georgia. And I worked for a company called Blue Ridge, Second Nature Blue Ridge, and did that for about a year, which I learned a heck of a lot about myself. Do you know anything about wilderness therapy?
I know a little bit about it, and actually a few of my classmates who graduated went into that, but I'd love to hear your perspective about it.
Yeah, so our program um, might be a little different from some other wilderness therapy programs out there. We did not work with adjudicated youth, so the courts did not send our students to us. Um, we were more of a private company, and our students' parents are kind of, they could see the path that their children were going down, and my students in particular were teenage boys with typically a substance abuse problems. So they were doing drugs or drinking or getting into trouble with the law, stealing, stuff like that. And their parents saw that something needed to change. So our program, these kids are um, basically surprised at their house by two transporters. Our students refer them as goons. So they got goon squatted, and basically they are picked up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, put on a plane or a car, wherever they happen to be. And we would get students from France and Lebanon and out west on the East Coast, and they would show up in the woods, and we'd have them for about 2 to 3 months, and we served as we wouldn't provide therapeutic sessions. They would have their own therapist, but we would facilitate essentially outdoor survival and document and assess their ability to adapt to life out in the woods. And every student got to live out of their backpack, set up their own shelter, and basically manage their life for the first time on their own, probably. So
What
being
was
in
it
a go ahead.
what was it like for you to step into that role? I mean, it doesn't sound like you had a history necessarily of working with troubled youth or teens. And so what was that like for you?
It was tough for me to try and detach from the mentality I had before being a camp counselor, where my job is to make sure everyone's having fun and also keep the students safe, but uh, primarily to provide an engaging and fun activity, and fulfill my own need for outdoor adventure. So this was kind of a different step, and we'd be in the woods for 8 days at a time, and then off for 6. So like half days on either end of that, but basically a week in the woods, a week off, a weekend, a week off. And that like on off mentality kind of became a grind. But that intense connection you share with these kids of, we're all suffering when it rains for a solid week, in the Northeast, Georgia, you experience those week-long rainstorms and storm cycles. So when all you have is a tarp, you're
Yeah.
you're under a tarp for a week, and everyone's trying to stay dry. And we're making these kids hike and build their own fire with traditional fire building methods like a bow drill, and everything they would have to harvest themselves from the woods. So we were teaching outdoor bushcraft, which I enjoy and love, but also at the same time, you know, not coddling these kids the way I would probably do at a summer camp. Like, okay, you're pissed off, you're angry, and I can understand why, but are you going to let your emotions like stop you from continuing to build your shelter? Are you going to eat cold food because you gave up on building a fire? Like, I'll give you some suggestions, but everything that happens is based off of your choice. So I learned a lot about myself during that time, and just sitting in these therapeutic sessions with the students that I had to observe, helped me understand myself a little bit. But ultimately it wasn't something that I could do for that long, because I guess I'm a sensitive guy. I like to be outside and have fun, but I'm empathetic to these kids, and I found myself taking on a lot of their emotional baggage when I should probably just detach. But it's difficult when you're living with these kids, and you create a real rapport, and they're like a little brother to you.
Mm.
So yeah, it was great, but it wasn't for me. So excuse me. After I did that for about a year, I moved out to Colorado, and I believe you were in Colorado too, right?
Yeah, yeah, I lived there for about 4 years and just
Me
moved
too.
back.
Yeah,
Okay, interesting.
yeah. I was in Crested Butte, Colorado for from like 2010 to like 2014 in the spring, and I was started off as a raft guide and snowboard ski instructor,
Right,
and
living the life.
living the deadbeat life, not making that much money, and
Yeah.
supplementing my my income as a line cook, so
Hmm.
I could get some free food and try and contribute to the roommate fund.
Right.
So that was great for a year, and I was able to get this has kind of like shifted me into my current position a little bit. I got into a position with the travel agency at Crested Butte Mountain Resort. Was a sales agent, building vacations, and talking to people on the phone that would call in and say, "We're thinking of coming to Crested Butte. What's there to do?" And I'm like, "Man, you can go skiing, you can go snowboarding, dog sledding, yada yada yada. Let me build this vacation for you." So got a little sales training with that, became a mid-level manager, the adventure services manager for the mountain, and would manage the uh, third-party vendors that would provide those activities that were off mountain. So if they weren't skiing, they could go learn how to drive a snowmobile or a snowcat, or go backcountry skiing, that kind of thing, and get off the mountain and do stuff like that. So did that for the rest of my time in Colorado, and moved to Chattanooga in 2014.
All right, I
And
got to ask about your move. Why did you
yeah,
decide to move?
oh
And
man,
where and how did you make the decision to choose Chattanooga?
yeah. So long story short, I got my heart broken.
Oh,
So it was time for me to move on. And I had been thinking of, like, a career change, because, even though the fringe benefits of living in a mountain town are great, you're still not making that much money. Um, so anyways, as I was applying for jobs, um, I had three opportunities on the table, one with UPS, one with Caterpillar, and one with Playcore, who I eventually took. But Playcore is a large parent company that owns many brands of recreation equipment, and Caterpillar, large construction equipment. UPS, UPS. But based off those three opportunities, I picked Chattanooga and Playcore, because Playcore, recreation. That's my major. I'd hopefully be talking and speaking with the same types of people I went to school with um, during these sales cycles and sales calls, so I could speak the language, and I hopefully have a bit of a pulse on the industry based off of my education. And it also happened to be in Chattanooga, which is like one of the coolest outdoor towns there is in the South. And I know you're in Alabama, and Alabama's got its own right to outdoor
yeah.
pursuits and trails and stuff like that. So like both this whole area in like Middle Tennessee and Northeast Alabama is just like a wonderful place for kayaking and rock climbing and mountain biking and hiking. You can do everything here except for skiing.
Yes.
So like it was a no brainer for me. It's like, man, there's so much fun stuff there. And that's how I got here.
I love that
So,
story. I can totally relate, as you might imagine. And I think a lot of people underestimate this part of the country. Everyone moves out to Colorado, and we went on that boat. Like I loved it there, but one thing that I missed was the trees and being
mm,
surrounded in the forest, and you can't see the 20 or 40 or 50 other people on the trail. All you see is the beautiful green trees around you, and you just get immersed in that. And that solitude is what I definitely appreciate now more than ever anytime that I go exploring in the South.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. And more colors in the fall,
That's
the,
right.
the aspens are great out there. But you can't beat like a late October,
Oh,
early November in the South. Personally, I think it's great.
I agree. All right, so you were working for Playcore, and what were you doing there?
Yes, I was an inside sales, um, you know, associate essentially, and was working with national accounts. Um, so basically, just working with a lot of different dealers and uh, people that were putting their feet on the street and shaking hands, and building these parks. And selling the amenities. I was servicing them. I was kind of like an internal customer service, and did that for a few months before a position came open in the Playcore surfacing division called Robertson Recreational Surfaces, and was in a similar fashion. Kind of had a hybrid role where I would service one account and on Playcore's Play and Park brand. So Play and Park, they're a national dealership group. And as a surfacing rep, I would help those reps with their surfacing needs when it comes to like artificial turf or poured in place rubber, a little bit more of a, a specialty surface versus just regular wood chips, which is what you're going to find on probably 95% of the playgrounds out there will have wood chips. But for these playgrounds and parks that want a inclusive surface on their play area that's easily accessible in a wheelchair or another mobility device, I would help them out with quoting and designs and that kind of thing. So I was doing that, and also doing some direct selling of my own if there were bids available for me to pursue when it's just a surfacing bid. So if a city was going to take their park and excavate all their old wood and they want to do a new surface, I would go after those. So did that for a few years. And in at the I guess it was, last year, January 2017, I got opportunity to work for Great Southern Recreation, and they are a independent dealer of a lot of Playcore lines. So now in my current role, I can sell Playcore's splash pad line, which is Water Odyssey, a playground line called Playcraft, their amenities, their site, shelter, and shade amenities, dog parks. We have a couple other lines that are not owned by Playcore, so we have a wide portfolio to use and take our little design toolbox and hopefully create a very unique space that a customer can be happy with and meets all of their design wishes. But we're also the ones that build it too. So we operate on a kind of a different level from some other companies out there that maybe just sell from a catalog. We really take it on ourselves to design, build, and help maintain these spaces that we put our name on and we put in the ground. So that's my trajectory. That's how I got here, where I'm like a kid with giant Legos. That's how it is.
Very cool. Okay. So, and then so you go around and you travel and you talk with, I'm guessing it's a lot of Parks and Recreation departments, or who are you mainly working with?
Yeah, we'll work with cities, parks and rec directors, city managers, city planners. For splash pads, we call on landscape architects a lot, and engineers that might have a fountain or a splash pad included in an overall, like, multi-million-dollar park renovation, but they do have a specialty area that's a playground or a splash pad. And we will come in and hopefully provide a consultant service in all hopes to hopefully be spec'd in a project and ultimately win the project. That's kind of the way we go through it. But we're
Yeah, it sounds like a similar process where someone puts out an RFP and then you bid and turn in a proposal, that kind of thing.
That is exactly right. So we'll do that, and I'm the guy that comes up with an idea. Hopefully it's good, and we try and get our point across, get our plan across with 3D models and artistic renderings the best that we can, and hopefully the price is right, the design is right, and we win the project. Sometimes we don't win the project, but that's how it goes. And we're just out there competing with a lot of other good companies out there in the Southeast.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. I see. I know what world you're talking about too, because I work for Greenplay and we do a similar type of thing, except for master
Mm-hmm.
plans and strategic plans. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't bring in a nice fancy like model. I wish we could bring in 3D models of a master plan. That'd be more fun. But that's
Mm-hmm.
very cool. So what kind of trends do you think that you're seeing? Like, do you I know you haven't been in this particular job for too long, but what do you think some trends in the field are when it comes to your work?
The biggest one for sure is that splash pads are just going through the roof, in our area anyway. More municipalities are they're going to move away from their in-ground pools. Maybe they're going to fill in their pool and replace it with the splash pad because it requires less maintenance and less staffing when it comes to lifeguards. Insurance is less. Just the ease of operation is basically a push button that any child can walk up and start the splash pad. So a lot of people like splash pads and the interactive fountains that provide a play by day, show by night scenario. So during the hours of 9 to 5, for example, it's set to play mode. And these are the more higher end fountains that from 9 to 5, maybe the ground sprays only go up to a 6 foot spray, but then at nighttime the lights come on, and then you've got a full 20 foot spray with lights and sometimes music. So these are installations that cities can use to draw people to an area and to also keep people in an area for longer. Specifically, if they were to put it into the plan of like a new downtown outdoor mall, as people are kind of missing, or as big box stores are falling in profitability, these developers and cities are trying to create a reason for people to bring their family and stay longer. And a lot of times fountains, specifically interactive fountains, provide that social aspect that keep people in a space longer, and then maybe they drift off to the local shops nearby. So fountains is a huge one. Water play is a huge one. And we're seeing that more playgrounds are starting to be less cookie cutter, less post and deck, traditional structures with, stairs over here, slide over there. And we're getting into more nature-based natural play, where designs are including large embankment hills with embankment slides. So the fall height is, less than a foot, but at the top of the hill, you're 12 feet above the exit of the slide. So you still get a wonderful view. If you're a 3 foot nothing little kid, you think you're on top of the world, because when you're little, everything looks so much bigger, right? Remember when you're climbing on a playground in preschool, and then you go back and look at your preschool playground as an adult and like, dang, that's tiny.
Yes.
But as a kid, you remember it being huge, right?
Yeah.
So these embankment hills, which are, you'll see these more pop up, provide kids an opportunity for this repeat play. They come down a slide and they immediately do a 180 and run back up the hill. So these kids are getting winded, they're getting tired, they're having fun rolling down the hill. If it's authentic real grass, or if it's an artificial turf, whatever it is, these kids love hills. They like to climb. They like to be up high and have a view. So we're seeing the natural landscape and the topography of these play spaces change, and you're going to start seeing less of a flat slab of a playground, and you're going to start seeing playgrounds with more hills and natural landscapes. And the topography won't limit a playground now. The topography will be used as an advantage in the design of a playground. And hopefully all to the benefit of the user and for the parent who's excited to visit a beautiful space.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me talk about this for a second, because I read an article by you about you said you like taking old inhabitable buildings or things and turning them and seeing their potential in them. And so what you were talking about with using the land as it is, I want to talk more about that. So give me your thoughts. Like, where did this, and maybe you can explain for anybody who's listening who hasn't read it, but like, where did this idea come from as far as like using the topography and using old things and turning them into something else?
Yeah. Well, I went to a park in Boone, North Carolina, and my wife's from Boone, and I went on a trail run with my brother-in-law, and he was like, yeah, this used to be an old landfill, essentially. And they rehabbed the site and added a trail system for mountain biking and hiking, and also put a really cool playground on the site. And one of the best examples, I think I'm getting the name right, it's like Fishkills Park in New York, where it used to be the filthiest landfill in America, like in the 80s. And New York used to be a rough place in the 80s, but there was an initiative to rehab the land and essentially turn this massive landfill into a park. And I believe it might be finished, but from the pictures that were in progress, they were able to create these beautiful rolling hills of native grasses, and canals where the tide would come in from the, um, I believe it's the Long Island Sound or the Atlantic Ocean, whatever, that water nearby, and created canoeing lanes and hiking trails and biking trails, and just an open space for people to escape the city. And it's, larger than Central Park, but it's further away. And you really get, a sense that you're in a different place. But being able to take a piece of land as it is and turn it into a public space is a great opportunity from a design build standpoint, because if you're able to cut cost on the potential grading and excavation and removal of thousands of tons of dirt and rock potentially to make a place perfectly flat, you're able to pack more play value into the space if you can use less of your budget on that pre-construction site prep. Maybe all you got to do is create a parking lot, and that's the kind of the extent of your site prep. And if you have a 12-foot high embankment, or a retaining wall situation, you can use that retaining wall. It might be ugly and you're sitting there and you're thinking, what can we ever use with this space? But you can turn that retaining wall into a vantage point for kids to climb up with either like rope nets or climbers, or we use GFRC, glass fiber reinforced concrete, and you can take that retaining wall and sculpt a traverse wall that looks like a climbing boulder, and you can build in different paths for climbing up to the top of the retaining wall and have slides coming down or fire poles or whatever. But being able to take a space that has potential, and for me as a designer to see the potential in that space and hopefully get the point across, and for somebody to latch onto that idea and say, yes, we can turn that kind of that blight of a quarter-acre lot into a pocket park with artificial turf and some non-poisonous landscaping, and create a wonderful space that can hopefully engage kids on many different levels by providing many opportunities for either thematic play or musical play or climbing play, risk reward, critical thinking when they're climbing on these structures and navigating these hills. That's why I'm in this business. That's why I gravitated towards the position I'm at now, because I get to be creative, and I get to hopefully think outside the box than someone that's used to seeing a playground with 4 posts, a deck, and a slide.
Right. Well, I think that there's a different mindset to that as well, because, there's risk associated with any playground. So what do you tell people when they're concerned about the liabilities of putting in these new features that may seem really good on the outset, but that there's actually a real risk associated with it?
Yeah. I try and tell my customers, I run into this a lot when I speak with school principals and PTAs specifically. They see a design that I have or an idea, and they're like, "Ooh, that's dangerous."
Right.
Like, "Oh, I can just see so many broken arms off of that," or whatever. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, you see broken arms off of a 6-inch curb too. Um, you've got 12 swings on your playground. Maybe no one ever told you that swings are the highest cause of injuries on a playground. But everybody has swings. A lot of people have swings. And as a kid, swings are great. And the risk is there for a kid to jump off of it, or a kid to walk into the swing lane and get hit by their friend. But you take your bumps and you learn. I'm not going to stand in front of my brother on the swing set ever again after getting hit in the head by his shoe. So, it's a learning tool. Cause and effect, risk reward. These are lessons that need to be taught on a playground, and playgrounds are the safest space to learn that. Some of our climbing structures by Berliner, they might be 30 feet tall. And to a parent or to a teacher, it's like, there's no way I'm going to let my 6-year-old on that. But if I can sit down and explain to you that the internal net design and the net that the kids are climbing on to get to the top, where there is a 30-foot slide, which is a huge height for a kid at that age, imagine the sense of mastery and the sense of accomplishment after navigating a climbing net to the top of a 30-foot structure and looking down and seeing how small their parents look. All the while, me as the designer, I know that the critical fall height for that piece of equipment is probably closer to 6 feet, because the way the net is designed, there's never an opportunity for a direct fall from the top to the bottom of the ground. So there's a catch into that net, where if a kid were to fall at the top, there are going to be a few opportunities for that kid to his fall to be slowed down by different parts of the net he can grab on, or she can grab on, and like catch themselves. If there is a fall, it's not going to feel that great, but it's not also going to end in a traumatic brain injury that might kill the kid, because it's not a 30-foot fall. However, the risk reward and that sense of accomplishment, I believe, warrants that risk, warrants that parent to be uncomfortable while they watch their child navigate and learn about the real world through their own hands and feet and eyes as they navigate a very complex system of nets. All the while, you see these kids climbing on these types of elements where it is a net matrix. They're not going crazy. They're going slow. They're taking their time, and they're learning on the fly as they do this, which is invaluable for a young growing mind, especially if you want to think of the development of children past the age of 3 on. Most playground equipment is designed for 2 age groups, ages 2 to 5 and ages 5 to 12. And the sooner you can introduce a child, typically around 5 years old and up, to some of these more engaging climbing elements, you are encouraging many different types of new brain pathways for critical thinking and cross body thinking, where you're going left brain, right hand here, left foot there, left hand here, right foot here. There's my friend. Don't get in their path. The spatial reasoning allows for these kids to just expand their development at an earlier age, and hopefully that can translate into more critical thinking down the road as it applies to school or a career, or if they're in a situation where they hit an obstacle, do they fold, or do they think of a different way to get around that obstacle? And maybe it's a lesson that they taught themselves on a playground 20 years ago, but that grit, that ability to understand an obstacle and adapt and overcome that obstacle, is a lesson that they taught themselves and will benefit them for years down the road.
So do you feel like playgrounds are the true, or I guess give me your philosophy on playgrounds as far as like a foundation for a child's life? Because a lot of times people just take their kids there for fun, and they don't really think about it being this learning experience per se.
Yeah. I think a lot of my opinion comes from my education in recreation, and the benefits of free play and the opportunities to explore yourself and give yourself a challenge by choice. I'm sure you're familiar with the challenge by choice phrase. But playgrounds today, as they are, by second grade, most kids have mastered everything on a playground. Maybe the one thing they're working on are the monkey bars, because grip strength and upper arm strength, doesn't develop until a later age. So they're working on monkey bars. But typically you're good by first or second grade for most playgrounds out there. So I want to see a playground that activates a child's imagination, activates a child's body physically, where they're going to be climbing around and learning the capacity of their grip strength, of their leg strength. by including musical instruments out there, you can encourage creativity and risk taking on a different way, with some of the musical equipment that we can install on a playground. Specifically our line free notes, it's set to a pentatonic scale. So I know that the pentatonic scale sounds good no matter how you hit the notes, right? It's the black keys on a piano. And if you can just hit those black keys and they're all going to kind of sound in harmony.
Right.
So these kids, they can go out and start doing that, start playing at an early age and experience what it's like to create music, to create a sound, and a melody, and maybe even start singing, which I'm horrified of public singing because I know my voice is terrible. But if I had exposure to, free play musical instruments at an earlier age, maybe I'd be more musically inclined for performance today. But along the lines of play opportunities, you've got to be able to engage kids on many different levels, especially when a hot button word is inclusivity. And
Right.
you want to create a space that is welcoming to children of all abilities. Specifically, a lot of attention is paid to children in wheelchairs
Mm-hmm.
and mobility devices. So you'll see more steel in post deck structures with ramps, and they'll follow the ADA guidelines. And you'll have a lot of ground level instruments that are easily accessible, around that 36-inch height. But that's only a small percentage of children with disabilities or children that are in wheelchairs. You have a lot more kids with maybe autism or Asperger's or they're somewhere on the spectrum. So being able to create a sensory proof zone, or I guess I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, but kind of like a safe space on the playground for if there is a child with autism that's overstimulated by sounds and sights of all the kids running around in the playground, that there's a little nook that might be a GFRC cave or a boulder that's got little critters and like little insects and animals sculpted into the play sculpture, so that they can sit down, kind of decompress, let the stimulation they kind of balance out and they get used to the stimulation, and maybe they're really into touching and they're tactily engaged, so they can explore the textures of the play equipment. You start to see roller slides out on more playgrounds today.
Mm-hmm.
And those roller slides, some kids like that. They like to feel the vibration as they go down the slide, and they enjoy the buzz that they feel as they go over each individual roller. And that's great for some. And then maybe another child that has a sensory disability, they just like to touch it. They just want to roll their hands over the top of it, and that's all they need, and they're happy doing that. So it's a kind of a Rubik's cube of creating these spaces that can hopefully challenge each student the way that they choose to be challenged, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And risk is a huge part of that, and allowing kids to determine how much risk is comfortable for them. And maybe on day one, they don't want to climb up to the top via a net climber. They'd rather go around the back, take the stairs, go up a transition stair set, and then go down the slide. And then maybe a week or two later, they're like, okay, I'm feeling good. I'm used to this space, and now I'm going to try the more difficult side. So
I love it because then they're making the choice and they have control over how much risk they want to take. And there's only so many places in your world, especially when you're growing up, that you can do that you actually have control of your day. Like I remember as a child just feeling you're living with your parents. You don't have any control over your life really. But when you go to play or you're out with your friends and you're playing a sport, like you finally do have that sense of being able to take risks, and no one can tell you, what to do or not to do on a playground. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's no right or wrong. My childhood favorite was Can't Touch Ground, or The Ground's Lava. And
Yes.
now it's like, how can you play tag without touching the ground? And that was always fun for me. And I was always a really hyperactive kid climbing on stuff. So I really enjoyed the ability to climb and not be told, get down from there, Dustin, like get down from there. Like my mom, yeah, but
Yeah,
playgrounds are great natural classrooms, for kids to learn about themselves and for them to, just learn together, learn how to share, learn how to help a friend climb up, learn how to play thematic play and pretend you're in a fort or you're a pirate or you're playing house or you're the store clerk and the customer. It's a wonderful thing when you just drop your kid off and observe from the bench or whatever, and you can see your child just interacting with complete strangers kids, and you see that this is what society could be like if we're all just kind of free of judgment of ourselves and of expectations of how we're supposed to be. And you can learn a lot of valuable lessons on a playground at an early age.
absolutely. And two, with the mental health of everybody, and we're so distracted by our phones, like we need
Hmm.
places where we can just go and learn more about each other. Which actually brings me to another question. What do you feel like the future of parks and recreation and maybe technology? Um,
Hmm.
because, when I've talked to a lot of people, they're talking about augmented reality in our parks, in our
Hmm.
playgrounds, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's not necessarily a negative, but it would change things a little bit. I'm just curious about your thoughts on the way things might change with technology.
Well, I know, I'm sure there will be at some point a QR code on a playground where it's kind of like, hide and seek, or not really hide and seek, it's just like seek, and you're looking for these QR codes. And if you scan the QR code, and from where you're standing, maybe as you navigate and turn with your smartphone, because kids are getting smartphones earlier and earlier, and I could talk for an hour about how I think that's a horrible idea, but I get it. Um, I have a flip phone for my personal line, so I'm trying to be better about my data consumption. But I understand kids want smartphones, and it's easy to give a kid a smartphone. But if you can use that smartphone, and scan it, scan a QR code on a playground, and as you look across the playground, there's like a whale jumping over the arch bridge that's connecting two sections of a playground, or something like that, where you're actually seeking different QR codes to learn about maybe the history of a city that's at a city park. And you scan this QR code and it's like, oh, well, here in 1972, Mr. Henry Ford drag raced down this city block. I don't know, whatever he did. I could see that being cool. I know there are some musical and kind of like light touch panels where you can put a child in almost a 360-degree, um, it's almost like a cage with lights and sounds on it, and the kids are timed, and they get 60 seconds to see how many lights that they can touch. So it has the kid jumping back and forth across a 6-foot diameter circle. So they're really engaged, trying to play almost like a 360-degree version of Simon, except you're not repeating a pattern. You're just trying to rack up points. There's a really great, product by Game Time called the GT Fit course, where it's essentially like they're like the first company to do the commercial take on the American Ninja Warrior obstacle course. So you can set a timer. They have timers built into it to where you can time your 40-yard dash, or you can time your time on start and stop of navigating the course. So I think there'll be some of that, some of those types of activities where you're challenging yourself, and you can challenge your friends to see if you can go faster, or if you can beat your best time and try and set a new PR. Um, one of the more interactive things that we do today with Great Southern Recreation and our fountain side, we have a company that we've partnered with that actually uses smartphone technology to control interactive fountains. So at nighttime, it's very clear of this interactive control, because as the lights are flashing and the water is colored by the LEDs, you could take your smartphone, scan a QR code on the basin or on the concrete near the basin, and actually control the lights of the fountain. So you can do the entire color spectrum, and then also use your phone's internal gyroscopic controls to make the water jump. So if you throw your phone up in the air, like just shake it up in the air, it'll bounce, and you can take your phone and tilt it left, and the water on the left will pop up, and you can tilt it right and the water on the right will pop up. So you can actually control the fountain and do it volcano mode, where volcano mode, you push the button and you start shaking your phone. And after you build it up to a certain level, the fountain will erupt with red light and make it reach its max height and kind of simulate a volcano eruption.
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
it's super, super cool. It's like cutting edge of the industry. And we're just hoping to find the right city that wants to do that, because it for something like that, it's a high investment and the city wants to see a return on it. So we can take that control system, and if you've ever controlled like a mountain camera for like a webcam, and you want to check the snow levels at a certain ski resort, you can log in to that website, take control of the mountain camera for about 30 seconds and look around,
Mm-hmm.
Same thing here. If you're in a queue and if you're at a public area where a lot of people are controlling the phone, before you reach your turn in the queue, your city can be running banner ads on your phone as you're waiting in the queue for the ice cream shop down the street or the gift shop that's right around the corner. So like, we're hoping that the technology and the enthusiasm connect at some point. And that's really what it takes, is an enthusiastic council member or city manager or a parks director or someone like you that's creating a master plan, and that city is forward thinking. It's like, we're going to embrace this technology and recreation, and how can we benefit our users and our small businesses. So,
Yeah, those are the things that excite me for sure. Because have you ever been to Atlanta's Centennial Park?
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Right? Like, perfect example of a way that these water features can bring people together. I remember, I think I was like 5 when the Olympics came to Atlanta, but
yeah,
I mean, it was an incredible experience. And exactly what you were just talking about, I pictured myself there next to the fountains and people just running around. Everyone had their bathing suit on. Like, it was a space to be. And I think that what a lot of city leaders, they want, but they don't necessarily put the two and two together, is that it requires an investment in those nice to have items like the playgrounds and this and that. But it turns out that those are actually the must have items, the things that you have to build your community and what people really enjoy and love about being in their place. Um,
yeah. And
yeah.
investing in that type of infrastructure only improves the value of homes that are within walking distance within those amenities. It improves the quality of life for anybody that's within essentially like a 2-mile radius for like foot traffic and bike traffic. And if you're talking about Atlanta, the Beltline, which is a huge recreational investment by the city of Atlanta, and the new West Park near Bankhead, and I think they're going to probably start breaking ground on that soon. But that park is going to be like maybe 20% bigger than Piedmont Park. Um,
Wow.
I'm not sure if you've seen master plans for that,
I
but
have not.
that's an incredible park, and will provide a much needed amenity to the almost forgotten west side of Atlanta. And the Beltline will be able to connect to that park and subsequently the eastern and north side of Atlanta, which are typically more affluent and being able to connect those two communities will be a wonderful thing in about 2 years, I think is their timeline. So cities are doing it. They're doing it for sure.
I think so too. All right, so let's talk about, while we're talking about making investments and realizing the link between parks and playgrounds and water features and economic development. That might lead into the next question quite well, or maybe not. You can take it wherever you want. But what do you feel when I say parks and recreation, we need to raise the bar? What comes to mind for you? Because everyone thinks a little bit differently about this. So what does it mean for parks and recreation to raise the bar?
More outdoor fitness equipment so you can really raise a bar and get stronger. No, I have no idea. If I was in a park and rec department's shoes, and I was tasked to be the director or a facilitator, and I was asked to raise the bar, what does that mean? I think the biggest thing is community engagement, and being able to provide activities that people really want to be a part of, as opposed to just like, all right, my kid plays rec league soccer, that's it. But how can you create engaging programming that get people out in droves? Is it, do you see a city park utilizing a inflatable theater and doing like bi-monthly drive-in nights where there are food trucks and you got a double feature playing with like a Disney movie at the front half of the show, and then a more PG-13 adult teenager oriented show in the evening, and you're in a park for 5 or 6 hours. I'm sure there are some communities out there that are doing something like that, but I think the biggest challenge for park and rec departments is the programming side and creating these itineraries throughout the year that people are stoked about. They're like, I love my park system. How do you get people to say, excuse me, that's probably the best question a parks and rec department could ask, is how do you make the community say, I love my park system? Yes. I love the public library and I love the park system. Any young family that has kids from the ages of 2 to 10, I'd expect them to be using that free entertainment all day long, not from just a recreation side, but from a cost saving side, to where you can use these taxpayer funded projects and activities that are going to be fun, not just for the kid, but for the whole family, outside of just rec sports or a new playground. But the programming side, I think, would be how I would raise a bar. Even though I would love to sell the highest priced playground to every city, I think a city could benefit more from investing in programming and developing a year-long calendar that everybody is stoked about.
All right, you guys, that was my conversation with Dustin. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We went on to talk about what he is looking forward to in the future, and I realized that the conversation went way longer than most of these episodes. So that being said, I kind of cut it off short, but hopefully you're able to get a lot out of this conversation. Please follow Dustin on LinkedIn. Check out Great Southern Rec. They're doing a lot of cool things, and let's certainly support each other and all the neat, innovative solutions that we are finding that make our parks and recreation a little bit better, a lot of it better. Thank you guys again. I will see you next week.